Welcome to Conversations with. My name is Shaley Hoogendoorn, and I live with bipolar 2 disorder. Sharing with others is healing, both individually and collectively. Sharing our stories will educate others, bring more understanding, shed more light, and smash more stigma. Our voices need to be heard. Our stories aren't over yet. This is Bipolar. Hi everyone, welcome back to This is Bipolar. I am pretty pumped because I have Jas from @the_bipolar_badass. So before I even get started, just go and follow her because she is doing beautiful things. And I'm really excited to talk to her today because we've kind of liked each other's stuff, but we've never had a real big conversation. So I'm really excited about that. I also have other good, exciting news for those of you that show up every podcast. I've been talking about Patreon, and I've been talking about how I want to do more things and different things and just go deeper in our community conversations. So Instagram has given me the opportunity to do subscriptions. So all those goodies that I've been telling you about, like behind the scenes and going deeper, extra footage from every podcast that I do, you are going to want to subscribe. So it's somewhere near the handle. And if you subscribe, it's like $6.99 US a month. And yeah, I've got some exciting things planned. So if this podcast means something to you, or if you follow along in the Instagram, I would be forever grateful for your support. And of course, I already jumped in, but if this is your first time, my name is Shaley Hoogendoorn. I live with bipolar 2 disorder. My pronouns are she, her, and I live in Vancouver, BC, which is on the unceded territory of the Coquitlam and Katzie First Nations. And so I'm going to let Jas introduce and tell a little bit about herself. This is Jas.
Hello, I am Jas. Like she said, I am the bipolar badass. I am currently living in California and I'm from Indiana. So that is really fun. I actually moved across the United States 2 years ago, or a year and a half ago. So that was wild. We can get into that when we talk about some like episode stuff because that
Yes,
was
we can.
interesting. And yeah, I'm an engineer. I actually work in automotive engineering. I absolutely love what I do. And I am working on kind of becoming a career guide for women with bipolar disorder. So um, those are kind of my projects at the moment and what I'm doing. But I absolutely, like I said, I love being an engineer and I love just talking about bipolar disorder and how to be you with bipolar disorder because
Yeah,
sometimes it can get confusing.
it can get so confusing. Yeah, I love that. Wow. I just learned a whole bunch of new things about you. That's amazing. I just want to thank you for coming on. I was just telling Jas that I literally asked her like 2 days ago, like, hey, what you doing Tuesday? And she said, yes, I'll come on. So thank you for doing that. It means a lot to me because sometimes scheduling is sometimes hard when you have a wild life and you have bipolar disorder. So I really appreciate that.
Absolutely no problem.
I would love to just dive right in, Jas. I would love to hear about maybe when you noticed something was going on or something was different, or the time leading up to your diagnosis. I would just love to hear about what was going on in your life or the symptoms you were having. I'm so curious about that.
So I started like you can always look back and like be like that was an episode. But I started really noticing that I was having some problems in college. I was having anxiety attacks when I went to go do speeches, and I love speaking. So I would go and stand in front of the room, get ready to do this talk that I'd prepared for, like actually done a lot of work to prepare for, and start crying because I was in front of people I don't know. I can't even identify still what was going on.
Wow.
But it was the first thing that really clued me in that there's really something wrong here.
Mhm.
And then the next thing that clued me in is just the heavy depressive episodes. Like I was going through times where I was so depressed I could get out of bed or struggled to get out of bed, and that just wasn't like me. So to have that was really strange and new. And I didn't know how to talk about it to a doctor, to
Mm.
anybody. So I just struggled with it, tried to figure it out myself, and kind of figured out I had bipolar disorder in college, but never actually asked anybody for help with it. I don't know what the disconnect was, but I never did.
Mm.
So I went through in my adult life, and my first big manic episode in adult life, I started dating somebody at the same time, and I thought I was so in love with them because they
Mm.
made me have all this energy. I was
Yeah.
so much more vibrant with them. The world was so beautiful. So, um, then they broke up with me within like a month. So
Oh,
it was the end of that manic episode, and into my therapist's office. For the first time, I got a therapist. In my adult life. I had had one in college, but was never really serious about going to therapy.
yeah.
But this, like, I got serious about going because I was getting suicidal to the point where I was sitting in my car, and I don't know how graphic you get on your podcast, but I was sitting in the car with the engine on and the garage door closed,
Oh, friend.
and I was not in a. I never. I got out of the car. I'm so proud of myself for getting out of that car,
Yes.
but it was a scary place to be in. So I was talking to my therapist when I told her I was doing that probably once a week getting home from work. She was like, "You need to go to the hospital, hun."
Yeah.
So that is the first time I was hospitalized for it was for depression and anxiety,
Mm.
and I did not really question anything, but I got a mood stabilizer, and
Okay.
that made me even think more. I was like, "Huh, they gave me a mood stabilizer. I think I have bipolar disorder and they just aren't telling me."
Mm.
Um, so, I went a couple more years, I think, even, without getting a
Wow.
diagnosis, and I was on the right medicine there then, to some
Mhm.
extent, at least. I was on a mood stabilizer and an antidepressant, so that it was at least somewhat regulating my bipolar disorder. Um, but it was still not doing everything, and I went off medication for, probably a month, and I was
Yeah.
on Effexor, and when you go off
Oh,
Effexor, it
shoot.
gives you severe suicidal thoughts sometimes, and
Oh,
I'm one of those people. So, I talked to my doctor for the first time having these severe suicidal thoughts, and I was like, "I think I have bipolar disorder." And she was like, "Why do you think that?" And I said, "Because I have these like severe lows, and
mhm.
then it can be the next day and I'll feel great."
Yeah.
And she was like, "I think we need to talk to somebody who knows what they're doing with psychology because I think you're right." So she sent me to a psychiatrist, and we got, I always forget which one diagnoses.
Yeah, I think this, I don't know if it's the same in the States, but I had to get diagnosed by a psychiatrist, and
Yeah,
then
it's a
they
psychiatrist
could
because
give medicine.
that's I because like there's psychologist, and I'm
I
like, that's
know.
not the same thing. That's
I know. I
but
think that's like for children. That's what I think. Because when I took one of my kids, they were called a psychologist. But then when I went to an adult, it was a psychiatrist. So I don't know if it's a specialty, but y'all correct us if we're wrong. We're just guessing here.
yeah. Um, but yeah, so uh I forget where I was at
You
completely.
were talking about how you went to a psychiatrist but actually, can I back up first? Because I had like three big questions when you were talking.
Yes.
So so question number one, could you, right now we're recording in, but it's probably going to come out in October, but right now is Suicide Awareness Month. And so I'd like to dive a little bit more into there because I think like there's this whole range that I've just learned probably over the past 5 years of suicidality. And like I would have told you a million times, like, oh no, 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 never was, never was. But I didn't really understand like passive suicidality, and also like having thoughts are different than plans, that are different than actions. And I'm wondering, because I've heard all along the spectrum, some people it just like in the moment they thought of it, or some people had had a build up and maybe had an attempt. But I'm curious about, if someone's listening right now, what did that feel like or look like for you?
Um, Early on, when I was in my early adult life, it was more plans. It was more I was having such long-term depressions
Yeah.
that I was making plans for how I was going to do it, when I was going to do it, um, how I was going to make sure it was successful, which is really scary.
Mm.
Um, so uh then it was planning. Now I will say my suicidal thoughts are more like random. It's like they're attacking me almost.
Yeah, yeah,
Um,
like intrusive thoughts kind of.
yeah, more intrusive thoughts
Yeah,
than anything. And I think it's something because I've worked on not getting in that headspace. They
yeah,
still come because of the bipolar, but I don't
yeah,
get in the headspace where I'm going to plan about them when they start coming. So they just
yeah.
like
And did they
pop up with
have
these random.
Yeah, and do they happen mostly in depressive episodes, all in depressive episodes, or is it still kind of in the back of your head during a manic episode?
Um, they mostly happen in depressive episodes for me, but I will say I have a lot of mixed episodes.
Okay.
So, yeah,
Yeah, so you go in and out and back and
yeah.
forth. Yeah.
It'll be
Oh,
like I have all the energy to make the plans, which is the scary time to be suicidal.
right,
So,
right, right. Wow. Yeah, and my other question is, and I don't know if you have the answer, but I found that so curious that they would give you a mood stabilizer in the hospital, but not give you a diagnosis. I didn't
yeah.
go to the hospital, but I went to like this by choice outpatient program, or maybe it wasn't out because I spent the night for a week. But anyways, I could come and go if I wanted or whatever, but I wanted to go there because I went on a really big high on an antidepressant, and then they had to wean me off and put me on. And they like slowly introduced it, and but didn't say bipolar disorder, but said mood disorder. But I'm surprised they would like release you and not like give you a diagnosis. That's strange.
Yeah.
What did they say when you left? They're just like, good luck.
They left my diagnosis as depression and general anxiety.
Okay, okay. That's really, really interesting to me. What was your experience like? Because I have heard, like, first of all, there is no shame in going to the hospital. If someone's listening and you're thinking, if you are having these thoughts, it's where you have to go. You have to go to emergency. We need you in this world. And second of all, people have had different experiences. I've heard from people that have had amazing experiences and that it went, as well as it could be for that type of situation. And then people that have had not so great experiences. And I'm curious about yours.
So, my experience when I went the very first time
Mm,
was pretty good, except for the emergency room experience.
mm,
Um, just because of the sheer amount of people in the emergency room and the way that they handled the the people in there for their mental health.
mm.
Because we were all put in one room despite what was going on in our lives. So there was one child who was manic and he was having a manic episode. I felt so sorry for this young man.
Mm.
And his parents were trying to keep him calm, but they were not being successful because he was deep in a manic episode. I think he was probably having some schizophrenic uh, or some psychosis,
Yeah.
really struggling. So, and I was in there having an anxiety attack because I was having such severe depression and they stripped everything away from me. I couldn't contact anyone.
Yeah.
So it was a very hard experience, but then I got to the facility I was going to be at, and it was the best experience you could have asked for being in a hospital. I was in group therapy pretty much
Mhm.
constantly, which was very good for me. I had the option of not doing that group therapy if it wasn't for me.
Right.
So I think that's one thing that I've learned now that I've gone to the hospital a couple of times. I will not
Yeah.
go back to an emergency room. If you need to, go to an emergency room
Yeah.
for sure, for sure, for sure. But now that I have plans in place, I try to plan which I haven't got one in California yet, so I need to do that. But I try to plan like what facility I will go to specifically because most facilities you can check yourself into here.
Oh,
So
okay.
you don't have to go to the hospital directly.
Oh, wow. Yeah, it's not like that in Canada. And it seems really cool that we have free healthcare and there's amazing parts of it, but also it's a year and a half waiting list to get a psychiatrist. So you don't have a choice. If you're not doing well, you know, that high in a manic episode or that depressed, you have to go to the hospital. Like you have to go through
Yeah.
emergency. Yeah, wow, that's so interesting. Thank you for sharing that. I wanted to keep going on your journey. You were talking about how like how you actually got the bipolar diagnosis. So you went to your general practitioner, like your regular doctor, and they said we need someone that's more experienced with mental health. And then you went there. Was that a psychiatrist
Yeah.
you went to? Yeah, how did
Yeah,
that
it was a
go?
psychiatrist. It went well because I got the diagnoses I needed. I was also getting a diagnosis for ADHD at the same time because I was
Okay.
struggling so much at work.
Yeah.
Um, and I it was so frustrating because you have to sit still for that long
Mm,
to get diagnosed with ADHD or bipolar disorder. You have to go through these huge assessments. Um, and it was a lot. Uh, and it was
yeah.
also a lot talking about these things that I had not really talked about before, like family type stuff,
Mm,
um, my suicidal thoughts.
mhm.
And I looked back, I couldn't even say suicidal thoughts when she was diagnosing me. I said bad thoughts. I said,
Yeah.
I have a lot of bad thoughts
Yeah.
because I wasn't ready to even admit myself what was going on, even though
Right.
I'd been to the hospital for it. You know what I
Yeah.
mean?
Yeah.
So,
I
um,
feel like our brains can convince ourselves that things aren't real,
yeah,
right? Like probably once every 3 years, I'm like, do I really have bipolar disorder? And so I've written like notes to myself. P.S. When you don't think you have bipolar disorder, you still have bipolar disorder, right? So it feels
yeah.
like they trick us a little bit, right? Yeah. Especially, do you find this? Like I find if I get hypomanic. So do you have bipolar 1 or bipolar 2?
I I'm diagnosed with bipolar 2. I have been told I have like a mixed type or
Oh,
bipolar.
okay.
I don't,
Yeah, it's a spectrum, right? Like that's how
yeah,
I feel like it's a spectrum. So I was curious. But I feel like when I'm hypomanic, it's like I can't even imagine or remember what it was like to be depressed. Like I
yeah,
can't even, right? So I never, so then if I get depressed, then I'm shocked. I'm like, right?
yeah,
Even though it happened pre-diagnosis every single winter, I'm just like it's shocking to me. And then when I'm depressed, I cannot remember what it feels like to feel good again, right? Or, you know, euthymic or so symptom free. And then I definitely, you know, crave and I never do anything about it. I never stop my meds, but I definitely think my brain tells me, oh, it would be so much better because I forget all the hard things and terrible things about hypomania. Does that happen to you?
yeah. I especially forgetting the hard things about hypomania or the fact that you crash afterwards because you start feeling those like little twinges of hypomanic symptoms and you're like, ooh, I could stay up a little later and work on this.
Just a little.
Just a little.
Yeah. I
Yeah.
call it
So,
stealing the night. It's like this weird feeling to me. It's like I'm because I have children, they're teenagers now, but when they were little, it was like the only time like someone didn't need me or do you know what I mean? And so it would like
yeah.
steal the night and then I always paid for it. Always. always paid for it. Wow, that's so interesting. I'm curious about, what were your reactions to finally finding out, like someone saying you have bipolar disorder?
I was actually really excited to finally have a diagnosis, finally have some answers, finally have like something to fall back on and be like, this is what's going on with me,
Yeah,
and something to explain it to myself so that I wasn't so confused
yeah,
by what I was feeling. So I think because it took me so long to even, like I said, I knew I had bipolar disorder in college. I had read several articles about, because I was having all these feelings and I was like, there's something going on. So I was looking things up. I'm like I said, I'm an engineer, I'm a scientist. I
mm,
delve into things.
yeah,
So I was looking things up and I knew I had it. I just didn't know how to get a diagnosis. So
right.
it was like, it was so helpful to finally have that diagnosis and confirmation. So I really embraced it. At the time, I was doing coaching for Bod Eye or Beachbody.
Okay.
And I like made a post. I have bipolar disorder. I'm on these medications. I love that I can, or I don't love, I think I said I am going to be honest about how I'm feeling now or something like that.
Wow. Yeah. Wow. I think I'm so curious if I look back because I'm just a touch older than you. And so basically like the internet started when I was in grade 12. So there wasn't like I couldn't look up, like I had no clue of things. I always knew there was something wrong, but I can really relate to you because as scared as I felt, it was like an explanation and not just like I have this personality flaw or like
Yeah.
I could separate it from who I am. Do you know what I mean? Even though I can't it's fully intertwined, but I could also, like you said, it explained something, right? And it felt like relief to me until I thought about telling other people. Then it didn't feel like such a relief. Before I ask you how it felt to tell other people, um I'm curious about did they explain to you about like how do you tell if you have bipolar and ADHD? Because when I'm hypomanic, like a lot of the stuff overlaps and one of my children has ADHD and I see a lot of that, but then I don't know, like I wouldn't know how they would tell the difference.
Yeah. Honestly, I have wondered if I truly have ADHD. I needed that diagnosis at that time.
Yeah.
I
Oh,
needed the medication for it. I needed something to help me survive at work.
yeah.
Um, but now that I look back on it, I'm like, is that the correct diagnosis? It might
Right.
not be.
Right.
Because when I'm stable, I don't know that I have those not able
Yeah.
to concentrate symptoms.
Yeah.
Um,
It was
that
interesting. I was talking to, I think it was Haley Rose. I think it was. Anyways, she was talking about that they would show up like executive functioning skills, like organizing, sequencing, staying on task, all of those things. She said that for hers, I think it was because it's ever present. That's why I think that's why she said that she had a dual diagnosis. And I feel like, and I'm not sure, but I feel like I have more crossover with ADHD symptoms when I'm hypomanic than when I'm
yeah.
depressed or symptom free. So maybe that's why. I don't know.
Yeah, I think it's more if you see them when you're in episodes, because I see some symptoms when I'm in depressed episodes and some
Mm,
symptoms when I'm in manic episodes.
okay.
Um but when I look at it, I don't know that I see the symptoms when I'm stable, and that's why I'm not sure that and that's where what uh Haley Rose or whoever you were talking to
Yeah.
said it's what I feel too. If you have ever present symptoms is when it um
Yeah. When it
becomes
gets much.
probably a dual diagnosis.
Yeah, yeah, I forget. I think she talked about it. She's from Mind Over Mood. So if you're listening right now, go back and listen to that episode where I interviewed her because I think she talks about it in there. But yeah, I find that so interesting because I'm always like, well, like should I go check this out, right? But yeah. So thank you for sharing that. That's very interesting. So you have your diagnosis now. You feel some relief. You feel like there may be like plans and things that can help you moving forward. What does that look like in your personal life in terms of, and work life in terms of, did you tell people right away? Who did you? How did you feel about it? We were just talking about Cherise Jewell and how we both adore her. And she was the one that told me that she says, did you know I have bipolar disorder? So it gives someone a minute to adjust and give an answer. And I thought that was really, really cool. And so I'm curious. Yeah. So that was like a triple question. So I'll repeat it because it was a lot. So did you tell people at first? How did you feel about it? And then do you have a specific way that you tell someone, whether they be in your small circle, work, etc.?
So I have not figured out how I like to tell people yet, but I
Gotcha.
do tell people. So when I first got diagnosed, like I said, I made a big like announcement post, which I look back and I feel like is kind of weird, but like it felt right at the time, so I did it.
Yeah.
And I felt really good about sharing, to be honest. I think it was
Awesome.
because I had kind of already shared about depression and anxiety in the past before, though.
Yeah.
So I'd kind of gotten over that hump of like sharing about your feelings type of thing.
Yeah.
And I didn't know how stigmatized bipolar disorder was. Um,
Really?
yeah. So when I look back at it, I'm like, yeah, bipolar disorder is kind of really stigmatized.
It,
People could have like really judged that.
yeah,
But
for sure.
and I told my work pretty immediately too because I needed FMLA
That
because family medical leave. It
okay.
essentially, yeah. So I talked to my work about it, got the leave that I needed, and uh, I was very open at work too because I was having
Mhm.
suicidal thoughts because I had stopped taking my Effexor soon after. It was actually like the overlap, like I got diagnosed as I was off the Effexor.
Okay.
So,
Wow.
um, I told my boss I was struggling at work and I had missed 2 days in a row, kind of just texting in the morning, like, I'm not going to come in.
Yeah.
And uh, he was like, you can't do that. And you can't do that if you have bipolar disorder, and try to make your mental health days planned. Um,
Mm,
but I needed it at the time and I was taking it, even
yeah.
though I did not have the FMLA to take it.
Yeah.
So he questioned it and I said, I'm suicidal.
Yeah.
I just straight up said it.
Wow.
And it definitely took him aback. And that is not probably the way you talk to your boss. But
Maybe. I don't know.
I don't know. But it got the point across that he probably should leave me alone about it for a second and I would figure
Yeah.
it out when the time came. And it also got me to get some help because
Yeah.
I was like, I just told my boss I'm suicidal. I should probably go get the
Yeah.
help I need for it.
They might ask me what I'm doing about that, right? Or
Yeah.
they might check in. That's amazing that you yeah, that you stuck up for yourself and that you were able to tell them. And were you afraid that you might lose your job or the reaction, or how did that go?
I think the main thing, I think I was not able to be afraid because I was so in my feelings with depression.
Gotcha.
So, looking back, I could have, or I don't think I couldn't have lost my job for it. I'm not the type of person that fears that I'm going to lose my job for it because of the type of companies I work for, because
Okay.
I could sue.
Okay.
That's my opinion on it because I do have bipolar disorder. I am
Yeah.
protected.
Yeah. And it is discrimination, right?
Yeah, and I always check the box, protect yourself. You have a disability. Check the box saying that you have a disability when you're applying for a job.
Wow. Wow, that's really powerful. I actually wrestled with that for a while. I think it was like I don't know, it's been a couple of years, but just this idea of, I didn't think of it as a disability, right? I didn't think of it, I don't know, I couldn't wrap my head around that. And then I'm like, wait a minute, does it affect all the things? Yes, 100%. And I didn't want to, it's almost like I was stigmatizing another community, right? I was like, oh, I don't know if I fit in that community, or I don't know if I fit in that community. And I'm like, wait a minute. If you don't want to be stigmatized for having bipolar disorder, you got to work that out, right? And I didn't even realize that I had it, but that is really really good advice. And I think that we're all, a lot of people are so terrified in their personal life and especially in their professional life to tell. So I love hearing a story about someone that is advocating for themselves. Way
And
to
I
go.
will say, you don't have to tell your boss. You don't have to tell the people that you immediately work with. You can tell HR. You
Yeah.
can tell the people that need to know.
Yes, that's powerful, right? You don't owe everybody your story. And do you find it, so for those of you that we said at the beginning that Jas is a creator and has a podcast as well that you should go listen to. We're going to talk more about that in the Going Deeper segment for the subscribers. But do you find it a little bit easier, like, to go online and tell the entire world than maybe like the person that sits next to you, like a coworker, or I don't know, for me it was like my kid's teacher. Like, I tell the
Yeah.
whole world, but this is kind of hard in person. How do you feel about that?
Yeah, it's so much easier to tell the whole world. And I don't know. I get why. It's because you're seeing these people every day.
Yeah.
It's not that the judgments of the world don't matter. The full stigmatization that the world has for mental health
Yeah.
affects the way that other people perceive us. So that's why we're so nervous about telling other people.
Yeah.
But at the same time, it's like those people actually are in our daily lives. If their judgment matters, it matters. If they
Yeah.
have judgments, it could be a big deal.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that's why we get so nervous about it, I feel like. But
Yeah.
I've gotten to the point where I am an uncomfortable sharer, to be honest.
Yes. Same.
And not in a way that it's like oversharing. I'm not like, I don't tell people the deep shit, but I will tell somebody if I'm suicidal at the moment. I will
Wow.
tell somebody that I'm having an anxiety attack or having dissociation.
Yeah.
And I tell people at work about my podcast so they can listen in if they want to.
Right? So that's what I always have to decide. I'm like, okay, if I mention that I have a podcast, I have to be ready to tell this person because, like yours, the title, right?
Yeah.
You can't just say, oh, I have a podcast. And then people say, when it's someone that I'm not comfortable with or I don't know, I'll start off with, it's a mental health podcast where I share stories, but inevitably someone's going to say, oh, what's it called? And then you're like,
Yeah.
hey, right, this is
Yeah.
bipolar. Oh yeah, that's me. Right? Yeah, I think that's really interesting. And I find that in the beginning, because it was like 13 years ago and I got diagnosed really late, like I was like 32. I had two
Yeah.
children, like it was wild. And so I felt nervous that people were going to think that I wasn't a good mom and all the things, because as we can see on TV shows that are still coming out today, it's always like the absentee mom that paints and runs away, right? There's
Yeah.
I'm like, I don't paint and I haven't run away. But whenever I see that on TV, I'm like, oh, I just wait for them to be like, they're bipolar. I'm like, come on. Like, there are very many of us out there that are, don't aren't the
Yeah.
stereotype. It's so frustrating. But I have found that the more I have given people a chance in my real life, or took a chance on telling them, I am shocked by some reactions in that they are so beautiful and so accepting. Um, yeah. How do you find, like, when you shared, have you had more good reactions than bad? Have you have any memorable ones?
So I would say the most surprising one I've had, there was an older gentleman that I work with. and his ex-wife has bipolar disorder, and he shared a lot of stories about his ex-wife having bipolar disorder.
Yeah.
And they weren't always the best light, of course, because sometimes it can make you have some issues with relationships if you aren't watching yourself.
100%. Yeah.
So he's telling me these stories, and eventually I tell him I have bipolar disorder, and I expected him to not be very supportive about it
Right.
and not really be very, because he's had some pretty negative experiences with somebody who has had bipolar disorder, and I can be
Yeah.
understanding of that. But he's been so supportive, and when I have anxiety attacks at work, he's the first one to be like, go outside, go do what you need to do. I'll take care of things here. He has a lot of experience, so he can kind of do the management side of things when I'm stepping out for a second.
Wow.
So it's just so amazing that he's had that good of like that response, and I've had that much support in my new workplace. Um, it's been amazing. So that's probably the most like surprising reaction I've
Yeah.
ever had.
Yeah. It's interesting because I don't tell a lot of people at work, but it's because of the type of job I have, not because I would
Yeah.
want to tell them. I'm a teacher on call, which is like fancy for substitute. And so I don't like right now, I'm in one school most of the time. I mostly work for my friends because you can request. So but I'm starting to get close to them. So they're finding out. And there was actually even one that I did like a bit of a leave for them because their daughter literally was having a mental health episode. And so I had never been really open there before because I meet them like once or twice. I go to your school. I'm not going to be like, hey, and I'm with the kids alone half the time, right?
Yeah.
So, but recently I've been kind of opening up because they asked me to like, because we're older, they start with asking me about Facebook. And then I know that like because I share my podcast on there and I share things on there, and sometimes by accident they get all linked by,
Yeah.
by Instagram. Like at first I was doing it on like it did this personal account and I thought it was going to the other account. Not that it matters, but I know they're going to find out. So I just started talking about it, and I cannot believe, one, how supportive, but two, how many people have come up. I've had like EAs that are in the class helping, a certain child that have been like, one actually whispered to me, like, only my husband knows I saw your podcast, or someone that I would have never guessed, which is again me just having to undo all that stigma and stereotypes we've been taught, that when she had a hospitalization and an attempt when she was in her teens. And so I've forged this like deeper relationships with people that I didn't even think or I thought might judge. So you might be surprised, right? What people think. Have I had bad reactions? Yes. I used to go to a very old school fundamentalist kind of, it was very cool, but very a very, I'm trying to be kind, traditional church. And there was a huge group of folks that were not understanding. And even though they were kind-hearted, said some hurtful things. So I don't even know why I'm going off, but I get really excited and interested about talking about telling people, because I know like out of the amount of messages that I get every day, a lot of people have said I haven't told anyone, and my heart breaks because to have to already deal with the illness and then hide, I feel so sad about that.
Yeah.
It's just, oh, okay. I want to hear about your like some of your memorable episodes, and I'm feeling like the move across country one that you mentioned before, that we need to talk about this. So tell
Yes.
me about this. I'm assuming, but tell me if I'm wrong, possibly a manic episode.
Yes. So it started out, I got an email at the end of December for a job that was my dream job.
Mm,
So I of course got so excited and immediately went hypomanic. Because that excitement in me just spurted up.
yep,
Um, and it helped me get the job,
yep,
because I was able to have the energy to do the work, to research everything I needed to research. And uh about 2 weeks before I got the job, I also got a puppy.
Oh,
I was
okay.
manic. I was
Yep.
manic at the time, and
Yep.
we bought a really expensive puppy. Um, and then I hear that I got this job that is literally across the country, like literally in California. I just bought a puppy. I have
Yeah.
2 dogs already.
Oh, wow.
Um, and I have a house in Ohio that I am only 3 years into buying. So all of this happens, and I'm like, I'm going to take this job. And I am severely manic, not able to plan anything.
Yeah.
I'm to the point where I'm actually, I will call it a manic episode, even though, because I was so severely unable to have a grip with reality, because
Yeah.
I thought it was like sane to be doing this. Like looking
Yeah.
back, it's like that was a little bit outside of the realm of stability. Like,
Yes.
thinking you could just up and move that quickly.
Yeah.
So I ended up moving across the United States with nothing but my CRV and a few buckets of clothes, and not even enough to make it across the United States. I called my parents to get gas money to make it to cross the United States the rest of the way, and for money
Wow.
to pay for my Airbnb once I got here. And
Wow.
I was manic, so I didn't tell them when I was at their house
Yeah.
before I left. I told them afterwards.
It's like a little part of you knew that maybe sometimes I don't, especially before I was medicated, don't tell everybody all my ideas because I'm just annoyed because I think they're going to talk me out of it and they don't really get it. Like there's
Yeah.
this weird thing where it's like, I just feel like uh, I know like a secret or I know, and
Yeah.
they just don't get it and they're in the way.
And that's how I felt. I was like, I know I can do this. Jasmine, you have $500 in your bank account.
Yeah. Yeah.
So,
Wow. What happened to the dogs? I need to know.
one of them is behind me, and the other two are with my ex-boyfriend in Ohio.
Okay.
So I moved here alone at first,
Yeah.
without any of the dogs, without my at the time boyfriend, and was hypomanic alone with no care team.
Oh, wow.
And I was trying to work on getting a care team. I got a PCP, a primary care physician,
Yeah.
and talked to them about getting more, but they never got my paperwork in the right places. I got really pissy with them and cursed them out in Target on the
Mhm.
phone.
Mhm.
Because I was still in this manic episode. I could not come down because I was not medicated outright.
Yeah.
Um,
Right.
so I finally get to bring my boyfriend and my dogs out here. We're living in hotels at this point.
Oh, wow.
Um, and yeah, it did not help the manic episode at all. I continued to be in a manic episode because I'm living in hotels. You don't have any stability. I'm
Yeah.
eating out every night.
Yeah.
Um, so then fast forward to finally getting a house, getting
Yeah.
where I'm living now. Um, and I forgot about the loan I got. I got a humongous loan because I was living in hotels.
Right.
So I had to do something to survive while I was living
Yeah.
in hotels. So yeah, it was just a big mess of a lot of things
Wow.
culminating
Yeah.
because this like the start of the excitement, like something good happened, you know what I
Yeah.
mean?
Yeah.
And it's so frustrating, like this excitement brought on, and like looking back, there's a lot of spots I could have made better decisions if I would have known how to make better decisions while I was manic.
Yeah.
That's something I'm working on now, but
Yeah.
um I
Well,
didn't know that yet.
yeah.
Yeah.
And it's easy to look back. And I think someone that doesn't have bipolar and has never experienced hypomania or mania or severe anxiety, yes, like how many years have I been at it? How much do I teach about the mindfulness or the things, strategies or whatever? But when you're in it, sometimes they feel impossible. It's kind of like when you're in it, and you're depressed, the things that you're supposed to do to try and help yourself not be depressed are the hardest things to do. Well, that's like when you're in a hypomanic episode, it's like, I know I should probably slow down and breathe. I know I probably shouldn't have iced coffee for lunch, but sometimes it just feels like,
Like
like
the only
hypomania.
option.
Yeah. So it's like hypomania. It's not, the things that you think aren't just suggestions. They feel like urgent demands. Like,
Yeah.
this is what I'm doing. Right. So I can completely see why you do this, and why this happened. And also, people don't understand that it isn't always bad or hard or difficult things. It can be beautiful things. I probably had one of my highest hypomanic episodes looking back is at my wedding, right? And that's a beautiful thing and a good thing. But the bipolar brain, it's just change, right? Change just can trigger it if we're not super duper careful, or if we have no idea, right?
Yeah.
So I think if someone's listening that loves someone with bipolar, I try to explain that it isn't, often I am trying, right? Often
Yeah.
my trying might not look like the trying, because I can't meditate for half an hour. I can literally take breaths for 2 minutes or whatever. And so I find that that's one of the biggest things that I want to get out there, is how difficult these things that someone that maybe isn't neurodivergent can do easily seems impossible.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah.
Yeah.
So tell me how, so during this time, during your hypomanic episode, were you working at the job? Like, you were actually
Yeah.
doing the job and dealing with all this? Wow.
Yeah. So I was working a new job, um, learning the ropes, introducing myself to new people at work, being severely hypomanic sometimes. Um, and going to parties at work. Somebody had a going away party, and I went to a party at work, and or a work party, not a party at work, a work party.
Yeah.
And I drank too much because
Yeah. We're good times.
yeah, yeah. And I am a manager. That's not something that I need to be doing.
Right.
So it it's still like, looking back, I'm like, man, I wish I wouldn't have done that early
Yeah.
on. Like,
Yeah.
made fun of the guys because they were making faces when they were drinking. Like,
Yeah. Yeah. You're like, oh, cringy. Was that me? Oh, that's going to keep
yeah,
you up at night when you're sad.
yeah. But
Wow. That's so interesting. That I think that sometimes, like we talked about, that it's a spectrum. Sometimes people, and there is no judgment for people that can work, can't work, all of the things.
yeah,
But I think that some folks just look at bipolar and think of one thing, right? Whereas sometimes you can, keep it together, do the things at work, and be successful in home life, have relationships or whatever, but eventually something is going to happen. I'd love to
yeah,
ask you about irritation and anger, because I feel like it's something that I've only opened up with in the past 2 years, just because, one, I used to go to church, and you have to be nice, and you're a woman, so you got to make people comfortable and nice, and so I didn't really talk about the severe irritability, and almost, I hate the word, but in my head, and it doesn't mean I took it out on people, but like the intense rage I can feel, like, so quickly. Can you relate? Tell me about the things to do with irritability. I would love to hear
yeah.
from you.
So I have such I get blackout rages, and
Wow.
it's scary to think I don't remember what I said. I've never had something where I didn't remember what I did and like actually did something to hurt somebody or do something that would have hurt somebody. But it's scary to think that I don't remember what I said, so like I could also not remember what I do.
Right.
Um, it's like the thought of it is scary.
Yeah.
And it's ruined some relationships, or almost ruined some relationships. I had a falling out with my best friend's wife at the time,
Mm.
And me and my best friend are repairing that relationship. We were like childhood best friends. So
Oh,
we're
wow.
working on repairing that relationship, but it's like we still had all those years where we didn't like each other or were
Yeah.
having feelings against each other. You know what I
Yeah.
mean?
Yeah. Yeah. Like estranged kind of.
Yeah.
Yeah. I know. And it's the hardest part in relationships because like I'm like, give me a physical symptom any day, even though to all my folks out there that have physical disabilities, I am not downplaying what you
Yes.
experience. It's just the thought that goes through my head is that uh, you know, nobody's gonna give me comfort or feel sorry for that symptom or have empathy or do you know what I mean? When they don't
Yeah.
understand, because you just seem like a big jerk. And it's
Yeah.
so frustrating because it's like it feels like I have this added responsibility to try and take care of, make sure a symptom is really taken care of. Whereas maybe if I was bleeding, I could get a little bit more help, right? And not push the people away that I love the most. I find that, yeah, I find it very frustrating because there's this fine line where I want people to understand that some of it doesn't feel like it's in my control. And yet, I have a responsibility to try to manage, right? Do you
Yeah.
find that line is blurry for you?
It's it's really hard. It I think my most recent example, at the very end of that manic episode, which ended recently, I broke up with my ex-boyfriend. I made that decision, and the decision was probably the right decision for a lot of different reasons.
Yeah,
But when I am depressed, I go to this thought that I need him, right?
yeah.
And when I am, I forget where I was going with this story. I'm sorry. I
That's okay.
apologize.
We were talking about irritability and we were talking about
Oh yeah.
symptoms. Yeah,
So basically like that irritability that came with the hypomania, it was making me feel like I couldn't even be touched by him. I couldn't even
mm,
exist with him.
yeah,
And it made it to where I didn't have the communication that we needed to have this breakup make sense to anybody.
right.
So I just broke up with him out of the blue. And
Yeah,
imagine how much that hurts to somebody.
yeah. Wow.
So it's like I look back and I think how better I could have done that, but
Mhm.
at the same time, you can't control it sometimes. And it's hard to not it's hard to take the responsibility that you need to take sometimes.
It is. It is. And then I find it really hard, even though it's when people like that are close to me have every right to call it out. I find it so hard because I beat myself up once I get out of it, right? I'm just like, why was I so mad about that in the first place? And then I beat myself up. And then if I've also then have to like apologize or talk about it with someone, it just makes my inner critic just go
Yeah.
wild at me. So it's just like I always be like, I want to be able to take constructive criticism, but I'm so sensitive that I've probably berated myself about the thing. So then if someone I love says it, it feels like devastating.
Yeah. It's
Yeah.
almost like the only type of criticism I can take is written
Yeah.
because then I
Right.
can like process it by myself
Yeah.
for a
Yeah.
second and realize like, oh, they didn't mean it that way, Jasmine.
Yeah. Because you give yourself pause, right? And
Yeah.
it's very hard my therapist is like, breathe for, take 60 seconds before you da 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 when you're triggered or whatever. And then one time, like, she made me sit and do 60 seconds is like 600 years. Like, it is a
Yeah.
very long time,
Especially if you're talking what rage. Oh my goodness.
right?
60 seconds. Even taking 10 is like, whoa.
Yeah. Yeah. And when you're hypomanic, like trying not to talk for 60 seconds, like it's terrible. It feels literally, I joke about it, but it's literally painful. Like I feel like I'm crawling out of my skin because
Yeah.
the things I have to say, even though I'm interrupting people and all the things, it feels worse in my body if I don't say it. Even though I know I'm going to interrupt someone and it probably isn't the best thing to say, it feels worse to have it stuck in my body. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. What are some of your right, I've been talking a lot about our like warning signs, and I've been trying to write those down for myself too, a lot, to remind myself the little warning signs beforehand. Are you able to recognize those with, let's start with getting depressed? Like, does it come on for you like bam, or do you have little warning signs?
I'm starting to work on identifying them more, but I definitely do have some little warning signs. Like with depression, it's like these little breadcrumbs of like tiredness. So like
Mm,
I'll be more apt to want to take a nap in the middle of the day, or more likely to not want to get up and go do something at work as soon as it's called.
yeah.
Things like that.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah, it was interesting. I was talking to Julie Fast, who's written all the books, and she was saying like, uh, bipolar disorder is a sleep and energy disorder. And I was like, that's the first thing. Like you said, how did you say that? I love that. The breadcrumbs of tiredness. Is that what you said?
yeah,
That's
little
so
breadcrumbs
good.
of tiredness.
Write that down. Patent that. I love it. It's true. It's true. And then with your, are you cyclical, or you said mixed episodes? So I'm thinking maybe you don't exactly know what's going to happen, because mine was like calendar cyclical before I was diagnosed. Do you notice the
Um,
cycle?
I notice a little bit like spring, I will go hypomanic if I haven't been. Um, Now I live in California, so I don't really notice the depression side of things. But like when I was in Ohio, it was hard because I would get depressions when it would get like really snowy and like you couldn't go outside and do things.
Yeah.
Um, but it's more so like the bipolar symptoms are almost like separate from that sometimes.
Mhm.
It's like I can have like the sadness from being cooped up and
Yeah.
still be in a hypomanic episode, and then it's really like you're cooped up and hypomanic both at the same time.
Wow.
Um,
And then
but
you
yeah.
probably feel like trapped, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, I can imagine. And so what are some of your early hypomanic signs, if you're aware?
Um, I would say just getting more goal oriented, which really sucks because I am absolutely like the most goal oriented person. I love going after big things in my life. But when I start having like the thought that, oh, I could write a book, like I could start doing that like tomorrow. I could get my PhD. When I start having those thoughts and they're all coming in at once, and I'm thinking I can actually do it like right now
Yeah.
without much planning,
Yeah.
then it's a pretty solid sign that I'm going hypomanic.
Yeah. Yeah. That's so true. Because I think what's hard for people to understand too is that some of these things are attainable. It's just, if I'm not managing or medicated, um, it's the sheer amount of the
Yeah.
ideas and
It's like I'm gonna try to do 50 of them at once, and
right.
they're all huge things.
Yeah, they're all huge things. And they are, like, many of them might be attainable one at a time or over a period of years, right?
Yeah.
Because
Like
I
I'm going
don't,
to be an author one day, but
yeah,
it's not
yeah,
gonna be tomorrow.
yeah, yeah. And I think too, the kind of misunderstanding is that nothing ever gets finished, or do you know what I mean? And sometimes that happens because there's so many ideas. But I mean, I've done really big, well, well executed ideas while being hypomanic, mostly, no, before and after diagnosis. But I think a lot of people want to get off their medication because you get so many ideas and you're excited, and they think, oh, it's taking away my creativity. But I would argue that it actually, you are already a creative person, and if you're managing
Yeah.
and medicated, because I'm like, I know for some people maybe it doesn't work, but I'm pro medicine, saved
Yeah.
my life. But I find that it helps me focus on one. Like if I wasn't managing and medicated, I wouldn't have been able to consistently do this podcast for 3 years, right? I knew, like, that's why I do 2 a month, because I know, because I have my career as well, I know that that's sustainable, because sometimes I
Yeah.
run and then crash, right? And even though I hope to be able to do one a week, I just wanted to be able to keep showing up. And I think, so I would argue that we're, except for when we're depressed, we're not less creative. It's just the sheer amount of ideas and the sheer amount of confidence, right?
Yes. And I like to say with the whole manic confidence,
Yeah.
just a note for all of us who do have bipolar disorder, that manic confidence isn't founded confidence. It's not true confidence. So remind yourself of that if you can. If you have the ability when you're manic, remind yourself this confidence isn't founded on anything.
Yeah, that's so true when we get the grandiosity. And it was interesting. I always bring up other people because I've been having these conversations. I get all excited. But Julie Fast again was talking about what it actually does in our brain. She explained to me is that, we can have these ideas other times, but what happens is it takes away, when you're manic or hypomanic, the part of your brain, it stops you with having inhibitions. So it's not that
Yeah.
you wouldn't have these ideas anyways, you just don't have those, hey, wait a minute, what would that look like? Or what do you need to do to be able to, like, Jasmine, how much money would you need for gas to maybe leave? Right?
Yeah.
So it takes away those inhibitions and foresight to plan. So that's, yeah, that's wild. Well, this has been such a good conversation. Am I'm so grateful to just be with other bipolar, and I'm sorry, but I'm calling you one of my besties, because
Yeah.
you come on my podcast and I feel instantly connected, and just that heart connection and just really understanding each other means the world to me. Before we wrap up and go and do our other extra going deeper part, I would love to hear if someone was listening right now and they were really struggling or identifying with a lot of things that we're saying, but haven't told anyone, or if they do have it, they are in an episode, what word of encouragement, or what would you say to them right now?
So I would say you can make it through anything. You've made it through everything so far. Now's no different. So this was actually one my dad kind of gave to me before I left for California, before he knew that I only had $500 in my bank account. But he said, I've always known I can make it through anything, and you are no different.
Wow.
So it reminded me that I can make it through this. I can make it through the hard times. I can
Yeah.
do the tough things that are necessary. So if you are currently going through the tough times, don't move across the country on $500. But you can make it through with good care, good self-care, good care team.
Yeah. Yeah. That's beautiful. And that is so true. And I know sometimes when we're really struggling, you just can't see a way forward, but just keep that movement moving forward, because I say sometimes I don't know when or how. And I love that you're not toxically positive either, but I try to say I don't know when or how, but I know there's better days than the ones
Yeah,
that I'm in. I know, and it may take me a while to get there, and and it might not be tomorrow, but just that idea of holding on, because you can get through it. And maybe you think you
yeah.
can't on your own, but like you said, reaching out for help, that was beautiful. So my friends, go and follow Jas. Go and follow her on Instagram. I noticed you've been doing a bunch of like daily lives lately, which is really
Yeah.
cool. I love that. So go and watch those and listen to her podcast, because she is just a light to those of us that live with bipolar disorder, and just loving the way she is just in showing up in the world, educating those that may know someone or maybe love someone that lives with bipolar disorder. So thank you for being on the podcast. And I'm really excited to dive into our Going Deeper segment.
Yeah.
This is Bipolar. Thanks again for tuning in. You can find video versions of This is Bipolar on our YouTube channel. We also have all our previous and soon to be future episodes of the podcast on Apple, Podbean, Spotify, and Google Play. We spend most of our time on Instagram at this.is.bipolar. There is a vibrant community there where we have conversations and post different ideas and different strategies, and we'd just love for you to join us there. It is so helpful if you enjoy our work or think it would be helpful to someone if you could like and share and save and follow us in all or any of those spaces. If you're a listener for the podcast, if you could leave a review, we would be forever grateful. Again, thank you for being here with us. Let's get the word out. Let's share lived experiences so that we can change the ideas that people have about bipolar and help those of us that live with it feel less alone. This is Bipolar.